The underground poker room sits beneath the warehouse like a cathedral built for sin. Green felt tables catch the light from fixtures that cost more than some people's cars, and the air hangs thick with cigar smoke and the weight of secrets. Stacks of cash sit in neat piles, hundreds of thousands of dollars being counted by men in black suits, their fingers moving with mechanical precision. The sound of chips clicking against each other echoes through the space, a rhythm like a heartbeat, steady and alive. Luca Caruso sits in his wheelchair positioned near the back corner, his eyes tracking every movement in the room with the focus of a general surveying a battlefield. He is 47 years old, but his presence makes age irrelevant. His body is broad-shouldered despite the metal frame that holds his legs, his dark hair silvered at the temples, his jaw defined and sharp as a knife. He wears a charcoal suit that costs $15,000, tailored perfectly to accommodate his wheelchair. A scar runs from the corner of his left eye down to his cheekbone, a permanent reminder of a betrayal from 22 years ago. On his right hand, a gold ring engraved with a symbol sits heavy on his middle finger. The symbol means power. The symbol means death to those who challenge it. For 3 weeks, he has been watching her. Elena Voss. The woman who stumbled into his world bleeding and broken, her face swollen from fists that belonged to a man named Tyler Brennan, her throat marked with handprints like a signature of violence. She had collapsed against the warehouse wall during a November downpour, rain streaming down her face, mixing with blood from a cut above her eye. His men had wanted to leave her there. She was nobody. Just another broken woman trying to survive in a city that swallows the desperate whole. But something in the way she looked at them, defiant even in pain, protective of something they could not see, had made Luca pause. He had carried her inside himself. His wheelchair moving through rain-slicked streets, his hands lifting her against his chest with surprising gentleness. His men had exchanged glances they thought he could not see. In 15 years of working for Luca Caruso, they had never seen him touch a woman like that. Not since Sophie. Now, 3 weeks later, Lena moves through his compound like a ghost, quiet, careful, always watching the doorways as if calculating escape routes. During the day, she stays in the East Wing, studying her nursing textbooks, her fingers tracing words she had been too poor to understand before. But at 11 o'clock every night, she zips her jacket and moves toward the service exit. Sergio reported it first. Tall, scarred across his knuckles from years of work in the family business, Sergio had approached Luca 2 weeks ago with his jaw tight. She leaves every night at 11, boss. 2 hours, sometimes 2.5. Returns empty-handed. Always uses the service exit, always checks the street before she moves. Then Enzo confirmed it, his voice steady but confused. Enzo was younger, only 34, with sharp eyes that miss nothing. She rides that scooter of hers, boss. The one that barely runs. Through the rain. To the east side, near 5th and Commerce. Luca had said nothing. He had simply positioned his wheelchair near the second-floor window that overlooks the courtyard and began to watch. Tonight, the November rain falls in sheets that sound like static against the glass. The temperature has dropped, and even from inside, Luca can see his breath forming small clouds. He has been sitting here for 40 minutes, waiting. His hand rests on the gun in his lap, a Glock 19, black and heavy, familiar as prayer. The service door opens at 11 o'clock exactly. Lena emerges wearing a jacket that has seen better days, its navy color faded almost to gray from countless washings. Her jeans are torn at the knees, not from fashion but from wear. Her shoes are sneakers held together with duct tape and hope. She pauses on the threshold, glancing back toward the building, and her face is illuminated for just a moment by the exterior light. Exhaustion has worn lines into her features. Her dark hair, wet from the rain, clings to her neck. She is 29 years old, but grief and hardship have made her look a decade older. She has no idea anyone is watching. She moves toward the scooter parked against the fence, a 1999 Vespa in faded cream, its engine covered with rust, its seat cracked from years of exposure. She mounts it with the familiarity of someone who has made this journey many times before. The engine sputters once, twice, then catches with a sound like a cough. From his position at the window, Luca watches her disappear into the rain. Downstairs, in the poker room, Sergio approaches with a glass of red wine that costs more than a month of Lena's old rent. "I will have Enzo follow her tonight, boss. If she is running intel to the Morellis or the Gambinos, we will have proof before dawn." Luca takes the wine without tasting it. His jaw tightens. The Morellis have been encroaching on his territory for months, testing the boundaries, seeing if a man in a wheelchair is still capable of defending what belongs to him. The Gambinos are worse, organized, methodical, patient. Either family would pay handsomely for information about his operation. About the gambling ring that generates $400,000 a month. About the protection rackets that keep the East Side functioning according to his rules. About the offshore accounts that hold his leverage. "Do it," Luca says. Sergio nods and withdraws, but Luca catches the look that passes between him and Enzo across the room. Concern. Confusion. Neither man wants to believe that Lena is a traitor. That bothers him more than it should. Luca Caruso was not always a man in a wheelchair. That is not the story he tells himself, but it is the truth. 15 years ago, on a May evening when the sky was clear and there was no warning of what was coming, a bullet meant for his older brother found him instead. It shattered his spine at L3 and L4, severing his connection to everything below his waist. He was 32 years old. He was supposed to be married 3 days later. Sophie Langford had cancelled the wedding by email. She wrote that she could not spend her life with a cripple. Those were her exact words. A cripple. Not a man. Not the person she had claimed to love. Just the wheels and the damage and the permanent loss of what they had planned. He had built his empire from the wheelchair instead. Had moved his operation beneath the warehouse where no one would see him struggling, where the only eyes that witnessed his pain belonged to people he owned. He had made himself more powerful than he had been before because power was the only thing left that made sense. Power and loyalty and the unspoken rule that betrayal was answered with blood. The gun in his lap feels heavy tonight. Heavier than it should. The rain continues to fall, and in the darkness of the November night, a small figure in a cream-colored Vespa moves through the empty streets of New Orleans, carrying something precious that she would protect with her life. She carries $200 in her jacket pocket, all that remains after Tyler Brennan took everything else. She carries the photograph of her late husband, faded and worn from the number of times she has looked at it. And she carries something else, something that will shatter Luca Caruso's certainty like glass. But he does not know this yet. He sits at his window and watches the rain and holds his gun, believing he knows exactly who she is. Believing she is a traitor. And in that moment of certainty, the foundation of everything he thinks he understands is already beginning to crack. Before we continue, drop a like if this story is hitting you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it and subscribe so you do not miss what is coming tomorrow. We are just getting started, and what happens next will break your heart and rebuild it in ways you do not expect. Now, let us go back to the beginning. Let us travel back 48 hours, to the November rain and the night Elena Voss stumbled into a world she was never meant to enter, carrying nothing but her scooter and her secrets and a love so fierce it would eventually bend the will of the most dangerous man in the city. 3 weeks earlier, November rain hammers the streets of New Orleans in thick, relentless sheets, and Elena Voss leans into the wind on a scooter that sounds like it is dying, making a wet, coughing sound with every rotation of the engine. The delivery box strapped to the back carries Thai takeout for apartment for C on Dauphine Street, and underneath the cardboard containers, wrapped in plastic, are her nursing textbooks, 14 chapters to study between this delivery and the next one at midnight. The rain soaks through her jacket despite the waterproof claim on the tag she cannot remember removing. Her hair sticks to her face in dark strands. Her knuckles are white on the handlebar. But what Elena cannot hide, what the rain cannot wash away, is the damage on her face. One eye swells closed, purple-black spreading across the socket like spilled ink. Her throat carries the shape of 5 fingers, handprint bruises so dark they look like a tattoo of violence, like someone branded her with their rage. She touches the marks gingerly with her free hand while stopped at a red light, and the contact makes her wince, makes her breath catch in her chest. The light turns green. She moves forward. Tyler Brennan came yesterday for the rent. He always came on the 1st of the month, climbing the stairs to her apartment on the 3rd floor of the Meridian building, the one with the broken elevator and the smell of mold that no amount of bleach can touch. She had $430 saved. She gave him $400. He stood in her kitchen, his shadow filling the small space, his shoulders too wide for the room, and he told her the rest was due in installments. He told her she could work it off in other ways. He smiled when he said it. That particular smile, the one that does not reach his eyes, the one that says he knows exactly what he wants and knows she cannot refuse because she needs this apartment more than she needs her dignity. Elena said no. The word came out barely a whisper, barely a sound, but it was the wrong sound to make. His hand closed around her throat so fast she did not even see it coming, just felt the pressure, felt the air cut off, felt herself lifted slightly off the ground. The world went white at the edges. His other hand became a fist. It came down like a hammer against her left eye. Then again. Then he released her and walked out, his footsteps heavy on the stairs, and she fell to her knees on her linoleum floor and did not cry because her tears had dried up somewhere between the oncology ward where her husband Marcus died 2 years ago and this moment, on this floor, in this apartment, with $200 left in her wallet and no way to make the rent in 7 days. The scooter sputters as she climbs the hill toward the apartment complex. The engine makes a sound like something breaking inside itself. She has named it 3 times in the 2 years she has owned it, and each name has felt like a prayer to a God that does not listen. She completes the delivery at 9:02 p.m. The customer does not tip. She does not expect a tip. She takes the empty box and the memory of the man's irritated expression, he wanted his food 5 minutes ago, and she heads back out into the rain. The scooter dies on Bourbon Street. Not a slow death. A sudden one. The engine cuts out mid-rotation, and Elena has to coast it to the side of the road, where the neon from a strip club bleeds pink and purple across the wet pavement. She tries the ignition 3 times. Nothing. The rain intensifies, coming down in sheets now, turning the street into a river. Her nursing textbooks are still in the box. She cannot let them get soaked. She pushes the scooter into an alley, into the darker space between 2 buildings, and that is when she sees it. Light bleeding from a basement entrance beneath an old warehouse, the kind of building that has stood in New Orleans for 100 years and nobody asks what happens inside. The kind of building where you do not ask questions because the answers might get you killed. The door is painted black. There is no sign. But there is light, and there is shelter, and Elena is cold enough and scared enough that she makes a decision that will change everything. She descends the concrete steps. Her hand trails along the iron railing, slick with rain. At the bottom, the door is made of reinforced steel. She pushes it open. The air hits her like a physical thing. Cigar smoke so thick you can taste it on your tongue, a tang of tobacco and money and something else, something that smells like power. The room is vast, a warehouse basement transformed into something that should not exist in polite society. Green felt tables under hanging brass lamps. Stacks of $100 bills being counted by men whose suits cost more than everything Elena has ever owned combined. The click of poker chips. The murmur of voices. And then, the silence. Every head turns. Every eye fixes on her. She stands in the doorway, soaked and small and marked with violence, and the room becomes very, very quiet. The kind of quiet that has weight. The kind of quiet that is full of calculation and danger. A man steps forward from the nearest table, hand moving toward something inside his jacket. His name is Sergio, though Elena does not know this yet. He is 6 feet tall, built like someone who has spent decades ensuring that people obey him. His voice, when it comes, sounds like gravel. We are closed to the public. Exit the building. Now. Elena cannot speak. Her throat is too bruised. Her voice, when it finally emerges, is barely a whisper, barely a sound. I just need shelter. The rain. My scooter died. I will leave when. You will leave now. Sergio reaches for her arm. A single hand rises from the back table, a gesture so small it is almost invisible, but every man in the room freezes. The hand belongs to Luca Caruso. Elena does not know his name yet, does not understand what that single raised hand means in this room, does not comprehend that she is looking at a man whose word determines whether people live or die, whose silence can destroy empires, whose presence alone carries the weight of empire. He sits in a wheelchair. The chair is custom, Italian leather, the kind that costs more than a luxury car. The man in the chair is mid-30s, maybe older, maybe younger, his eyes carry an age that has nothing to do with years. Dark hair, dark eyes that cut like a blade through the haze of cigar smoke. His suit is charcoal grey, tailored so precisely it seems to have been painted onto his shoulders. An open white shirt at his chest reveals a thin gold chain, a single religious medal that catches the lamplight. One hand rests on the armrest of the chair. The other hand, the one that just silenced an entire room, has returned to the poker table. A scar runs from the corner of his right eye to his cheekbone, a thin white line that looks like it was drawn with a knife. His voice, when he speaks, is deep and solid like an oath, like something that cannot be broken once it has been spoken. Sergio. Let me see her face. Sergio does not move. This is the thing about power, sometimes it requires clarification, requires the person in power to step closer to the edge of what they mean. Luca leans forward slightly in his wheelchair, and that small movement carries more authority than any shout. I said, let me see her face. Sergio steps back. His jaw tightens, but he steps back. Luca wheels himself forward. The wheelchair moves with a soft, mechanical whisper. Elena wants to run. Every instinct in her body is screaming to run, to flee this basement, to get back to the rain and the dying scooter and the world where people like her exist. But her legs have stopped responding to her brain. She stands very still. She watches him approach. When he stops, when the wheelchair is close enough that she can smell his cologne, something expensive and clean, something that smells like money and power, he tilts his head slightly, studying her damaged face with an expression that does not change, that gives nothing away. Who did that to you? Elena's lips move but no sound comes out. The bruises around her throat feel like they are tightening, like they are closing off her airway all over again. Her eye throbs with a pain that has settled into something permanent, something that feels like it will never leave. Luca does not ask again. He simply waits. The room waits with him. Even the sound of rain against the warehouse exterior seems to pause, seems to hold its breath. My landlord, Elena whispers. Tyler Brennan. He came for rent and I could not pay all of it, and when I would not give him what he wanted, She stops. There is no point finishing. Her throat tells the story. Her eye tells the story. Luca nods once, a small, precise gesture. He does not express anger or sympathy. He simply nods, and then he speaks to Sergio without turning around. Get her dry clothes. The guest room. She stays until the rain stops. Boss, that is not. Yes, it is. The words carry a finality that means the conversation is over. Sergio's jaw clenches, but he steps forward and gestures for Elena to follow. She moves like someone in a dream, like someone who has slipped sideways into a world that does not follow the rules of the world she came from. Behind her, Luca Caruso watches her go, and his expression shifts, just slightly, just enough for Enzo, the lieutenant who has worked for him for 12 years, to notice something he has never seen before. In all these years, Enzo says quietly, I have never seen him look at anyone like that. Luca does not respond. He picks up his poker cards and studies them, and if his hands are shaking slightly, if there is something in his chest that has shifted and will not shift back, no one comments on it. The game continues. But in the guest room down the hallway, Elena Voss wraps herself in a blanket that costs more than her scooter, wrapped in a blanket that costs more than her rent payment, and she touches the bruises on her throat and understands that something has changed. She does not know what. She does not know that the man in the wheelchair has just decided that Tyler Brennan has made a mistake so grave that it will cost him everything. She only knows that for the first time in 2 years, since her husband died and her world collapsed into this desperate, drowning life, someone has looked at her and seen something other than nobody. The November rain hammers the warehouse windows like 1,000 small fists demanding entry. Elena Voss sits at the metal desk near the poker room entrance, a ledger open before her, checking identification cards with the precision of someone who has learned that one mistake costs lives. 3 nights a week, $300 cash, no questions asked. It is enough to delay the inevitable, but not enough to stop it. She does not look up when Luca wheels past at 11 o'clock, heading toward the back offices. She has learned not to meet his eyes. But she feels the weight of his attention, the way it settles on her like a hand pressing against her spine. The first week of her employment passes in this careful silence. Luca watches her from across the warehouse floor. She can feel it like a blade pressed against her throat. She serves him coffee sometimes, black and scalding, and his fingers brush hers when he takes the cup. His skin is warm. Everything about him radiates a controlled violence that makes her understand why men in expensive suits bow their heads when he enters a room. But what Elena does not understand is why he has not asked her any questions. Why he has not demanded to know her history, her secrets, the reason she appears bruised and cautious, moving through the world like a ghost afraid of her own shadow. At midnight on the 4th night, Tyler Brennan arrives at her apartment door. He does not knock. He uses the key she gave him once, 3 months ago, when she thought it meant protection instead of permission. The door swings open and he fills the space like something diseased, reeking of whiskey and cigarettes, his small eyes bright with a hunger that has nothing to do with money. Elena is in her nightgown, thin cotton that belonged to her mother. She pulls her cardigan around herself and her voice comes out steady, which surprises them both. It is past midnight. You need to leave. Brennan's laugh is a bark, ugly and sharp. He holds up a document, papers yellowed and covered in numbers that make no sense. His handwriting is all over them, signatures he forged, charges he invented. $1,000 here for emergency repairs. $2,000 for pest control. $20,000 for structural assessment. The numbers accumulate like a curse that cannot be erased. $65,000, Elena. That is what you owe me. You have 7 days to come up with it, or I file for eviction and have you arrested for property damage. He points to photographs of damage he himself caused, a hole in the wall from when he threw her against it, broken windows from his rage. Looks like you tore this place apart, doesn't it? Her blood moves slowly through her veins, syrup thick with fear. She knows the law. She has studied it during her nursing courses, late at night when her brain was too tired but her survival instinct would not let her sleep. What he is doing is illegal. What he is doing violates every tenant protection statute in the state. But Elena also knows something deeper than law. Nobody listens to women like her. Nobody protects them. The police will see a landlord and a defaulting tenant, not a predator and his prey. I will have it, she lies. The words taste like copper. Brennan steps closer. His hand reaches out and touches her cheek where the bruises have finally faded to yellow, almost invisible now. His thumb traces the place where his knuckles left their mark 2 weeks ago. Or we work something else out. A sound cuts through the darkness, footsteps on the stairs outside, deliberate and measured. Sergio appears in the doorway like something summoned from a nightmare. He is 6'3", 240 pounds of muscle and scar tissue, and his right hand rests on the gun at his waist. His face is blank, but his eyes burn like coals. The boss says you leave. Now. Brennan's jaw clenches. For a moment, something dangerous flickers across his face, the understanding that he has overstepped, that there are boundaries even he cannot cross. But his smile does not falter. It simply transforms into something colder, more poisonous. This is not over, he says to Elena, and then he walks past Sergio and disappears into the night. Sergio watches him go, then turns to Elena. You should not be here alone anymore, he says, and it is not a question. 2 days later, at an upscale restaurant in the French Quarter where the wine costs more than Elena's monthly salary, Sophie Langford sits across from Tyler Brennan in a private booth. Sophie is 48 years old but carries her age like an ornament, her dark hair swept back from a face that has been carefully maintained through procedures and discipline. She wears a white silk blouse and a platinum necklace, and diamonds rest in her ears like frozen tears. Sophie Langford owns 37 apartment buildings throughout New Orleans. She has made her fortune from people like Elena, desperate, invisible, with no one to fight for them. She buys properties in deteriorating neighborhoods, raises the rent by 300%, and when people cannot pay, she destroys them with fees and false charges and eviction notices that rain down like curses. She has done very well. This girl, Sophie says, sliding a photograph across the table. It is Elena, taken from across the street, working her shift at the warehouse entrance. She works for Caruso now. Brennan nods, swallowing wine. Started 3 weeks ago. 3 nights a week, cash payments. Something about her, though, she is different. Quiet. Smart. Sophie's eyes glitter. She has not seen Luca Caruso in 12 years, not since the day he told her their marriage was over, that he was building something she could never be part of, that her emptiness was not something he could fill anymore. She has spent 12 years becoming wealthier and more powerful, and still it has not been enough to erase the sound of his voice that day, the indifference in his eyes. I want to know everything, Sophie says. She pulls out an envelope and slides it across the white tablecloth. Inside are $50 $100 bills. $5,000. I want to know where he goes. Who he sees. What he is hiding. Brennan pockets the envelope without counting it. There is more money if you get her to turn on him. She is vulnerable. She is drowning. If I keep the pressure on or eviction, threats, financial ruin, she will break eventually. And when she does, she will tell you everything. Sophie smiles, and it is the smile of someone who has spent years imagining this moment. Keep pressing, she says. I want to know his weaknesses. I want to know what he loves enough to die for. Meanwhile, on the east side of the city, at St. Catherine's homeless shelter, Elena sits in the courtyard under a broken umbrella as November rain falls like tears from an angry sky. Beside her is Oliver Caruso, 6 years old, dark curly hair plastered to his forehead, clutching a styrofoam cup of chicken soup she brought from Luca's warehouse, made from her own $200. Oliver has not spoken in 3 days. The shelter director said he arrived 72 hours ago, will not give a name, will not tell anyone where he came from. He simply sits in the corner of the dining room and stares at nothing, his small hands shaking. Elena sits beside him every night at 11 o'clock after her shift ends. Are you warm enough? She asks softly. Oliver shakes his head. His teeth chatter. Elena takes off her cardigan and wraps it around his small shoulders. The cardigan is threadbare, worn soft from years of washing, but it is the best thing she owns. I brought you soup, she says. And bread. There is butter in the container. Oliver looks at her, really looks at her, and his eyes are ancient and broken. When he speaks, his voice is barely a whisper, the sound of a child learning that the world is not safe. Are you going to leave me too? Elena's heart fractures. She sets down the soup and takes both of his hands in hers, and her voice comes out strong and certain, the way a mother's voice should sound. No, baby. I am not going anywhere. I promise you. On the second night, while helping Oliver with his homework in the shelter's small library, he looks up at her with those ancient eyes and says one word that changes everything. Mama. He said it accidentally, like he was testing the word, like he had been waiting for someone to fill that space and she was the only one who had ever sat long enough to listen. Elena freezes completely, her pencil suspended over the workbook, and then she pulls him close and buries her face in his dark curls. It is okay, sweetheart. It is okay. On the third night, Oliver tells her about the wedding. He was 5 years old. His mama, Sophie Langford, brought him to a church in her white Mercedes, told him to wait inside while she spoke to someone, told him his papa would come get him soon. He waited in that white dress she made him wear, waited in the pews while the rain started, waited until a priest found him at 3 in the morning, crying so hard he could not breathe. Elena understands immediately. The pendant around his neck, silver, expensive, engraved with Caruso, Oliver, suddenly makes terrible sense. Oliver is the son of the most dangerous man in New Orleans, abandoned at his father's wedding, left in the rain like a piece of trash. Oliver is the reason Luca Caruso stopped looking upstairs 3 years ago. Elena does not ask how Oliver ended up at St. Catherine's. She does not need to know. What matters is that he is here, and he is scared, and he called her Mama, and she will protect him with her last breath, consequences be damned. What Elena does not know is that Luca Caruso has been watching her leave the warehouse every night at 11 o'clock. What she does not know is that his suspicion has hardened into certainty, that he has ordered Enzo to follow her, to report everything, to find out who she is meeting and why. What she does not know is that in exactly 17 minutes, Enzo will watch from the shadows as she walks into St. Catherine's shelter. He will watch through the rain-streaked window as she kneels beside a 6-year-old boy with dark curly hair and olive skin. He will see her kiss the top of his head and wipe his tears away. And then he will see the pendant. His breath will catch. His hand will go to his phone. Because that pendant, that name, belongs to a child everyone believed was dead. Enzo will have the answer to a question his boss has been too broken to ask in 5 years. And everything will change. Enzo's phone buzzes in his pocket at 11:08 p.m. A photograph loads on his screen, the image he captured through the rain-streaked window of St. Catherine's shelter. Elena Voss, kneeling beside a 6-year-old boy with dark curling hair and olive skin. Her hand stroking his head. His head resting in her lap like she was the only safe place in the world. And around the boy's neck, catching what little light filtered through the glass, a silver pendant engraved with one word, Caruso. Enzo's breath catches in his throat. He does not move. He does not call out. He simply stares at the photograph for what feels like an eternity, his mind processing something that cannot be real, something that should have died 5 years ago in his boss's heart. He walks to the warehouse at midnight. The rain has not stopped since November began, and it falls now like bullets against the glass ceiling of Luca Caruso's office. The space is vast and cold, all steel and shadow, with one man in a wheelchair positioned at a window that overlooks the entire city. Luca has not slept. He never sleeps anymore. Enzo enters slowly, the way one approaches a wounded animal. Luca does not turn. "Boss," Enzo says, his voice steady despite the chaos erupting in his chest. "You need to see something." Luca's hand tightens on the wheelchair's armrest. "Not now, Enzo." "Now," Enzo insists. He steps forward and holds the phone where his boss cannot avoid it. "You need to see this now." The silence that follows is the silence of a world stopping. Luca takes the phone with a hand that begins to shake before his fingers even close around it. He looks at the photograph for 3 seconds. 5. 10. His jaw clenches so hard his men standing in the corners can see the muscle working beneath his skin. "Where?" he breathes, and the word is not a question. It is a demand made of the universe itself. "St. Catherine's homeless shelter," Enzo says. She goes there every night at 11. She sits with him. She holds him. Enzo stops, watching his boss's face, watching the cracks form across the mask of control that has held for 5 years. She calls herself his mother. Luca does not respond. He cannot. The hand holding the phone falls slowly to his lap, and when he finally speaks, his voice is barely a whisper, barely human. "Why did she not tell me? She had every opportunity. I would have." He stops, unable to finish. Unable to say the things he would have done, the empires he would have burned, the wars he would have waged. "Why?" Enzo hesitates. He has learned in 15 years of serving Luca Caruso that some questions do not have answers that matter. Maybe she was afraid, boss. Maybe she thought you would not believe her. Maybe she thought you would take him and she would lose him. Luca closes his eyes. The photograph remains in his hand, trembling slightly, as if his body has betrayed his will and chosen to feel something his mind still resists. Get Sergio, Luca says. We go to the shelter. Now. The November rain is indifferent to power or sorrow. It falls on the homeless shelter the same way it falls on mansions. Sergio pushes the wheelchair through the downpour, the older man's shoulders broad and steady, his movements precise despite the water running down his face. Luca does not feel the rain. He feels nothing except the weight of the photograph still pressed against his thigh where he has shoved it into his pocket. The shelter is quiet at 1:33 in the morning. Most of the residents are asleep on cots separated by thin dividers. But in the corner near the supply closet, on a mattress on the floor, Elena lies with a small boy pressed against her side. Oliver. His son. His Oliver, who he has not seen since the night of the wedding, since the night Sophie took him away with a lie so cruel it had destroyed everything Luca thought he was. Through the window, Luca watches. He watches his son's small chest rising and falling. He watches Elena's hand moving gently across the child's hair. He watches her hum something soft and wordless, a prayer or a lullaby, her voice trembling with an emotion so raw it carries through the glass. And Luca Caruso, the man who has not cried in 5 years, who has ordered executions with less feeling than a man might order coffee, breaks. The tears come silent and devastating, streaming down his face as Sergio grips his shoulder. Luca's hands grip the arms of the wheelchair so tightly his knuckles turn white. His body shakes with the force of 5 years of grief pouring out in a single moment, 5 years of believing his son was dead, 5 years of thinking love itself had been a lie, and now, the boy is alive, and a woman who owns nothing in this world loves him enough to sleep on a shelter floor. Sergio says nothing. He simply stands there and bears witness to his boss's devastation, and his silence is a kind of mercy. But mercy is a luxury neither of them can afford. 2 hours later, at 3:08 in the morning, Tyler Brennan receives a call from Sophie Langford. His voice is slurred with cheap whiskey when he answers. It is time, Sophie says, and her voice is a blade wrapped in silk. The woman has had her moment of joy with the boy. Now we take everything from her. Brennan laughs, a sound like gravel in a disposal. I like the way you think, Sophie. The fake charges are ready. I have 2 cops on the payroll. We move at dawn. By the time the sun comes up, Elena Voss will be nothing but a cautionary tale. Better, Sophie purrs. I have a news crew standing by. We arrest her on camera, and by breakfast, every screen in this city is showing her in handcuffs. By noon, she is destroyed. They do not know that Luca is listening to this conversation. They do not know that his men have been listening for 3 days, recording every word, building a map of their conspiracy that reaches into federal crimes and years of predatory schemes. They do not know that they are already dead, that the only question remaining is how slowly they will die. At 5:48 in the morning, the rain intensifies. Thunder cracks across the sky like the world breaking open. At 5:03, police cars arrive at Elena's apartment building. Brennan is with them, dressed in a suit that costs more than her annual salary, his face arranged in an expression of wounded betrayal. Elena is asleep when they pound on the door. She opens it in the pajamas she bought at a thrift store for $7, her hair tangled, her eyes confused. Oliver is behind her, clutching his stuffed rabbit. Elena Voss, the officer says, reading from a document that is a forgery, a lie built on lies. You are under arrest for felony theft. You stole $65,000 from Tyler Brennan's property management company. The world tilts. Elena's mind cannot process the words fast enough. She reaches for Oliver, but Brennan steps forward, blocking her. You manipulated me, he says, his voice full of performative pain. I trusted you. I gave you a home when no one else would. Oliver begins to cry. His small hand reaches for Elena as an officer steps forward with handcuffs. Mama, Oliver sobs. Mama, no. Mama, do not go. The sound of his voice saying her name while she is pulled away will be the moment Elena remembers years later when people ask her how she survived the next 72 hours. It will be the sound that keeps her fighting when everything tells her to surrender. The holding cell is cold. The floor is concrete. The window sits 8 feet high, and through it Elena can see the November rain continuing its endless assault on the city. She has been strip-searched. She has been photographed for a mugshot. She has been read her rights while Oliver screamed in the background, his voice echoing through the police station until Brennan carried him away. $200. That is all the money Elena has ever been able to save. It sits in her pocket, or it did before they took it, counted it, documented it, locked it away like evidence of her worthlessness. The photograph of Marcus, her dead husband, the only possession that matters, they took that too. His face is now sitting in an evidence locker, catalogued like he was never loved, never real. The cell is freezing. Elena's breath comes out in visible clouds. She presses her hands against the concrete wall and thinks about the sound of Oliver's crying. She thinks about how she promised him she would not leave. She thinks about the news broadcast she heard from the guard's radio, the story already spreading: local woman steals from landlord, uses vulnerable child as cover. Her photograph is there on the screen, her face framed as a criminal, as a predator, as someone unworthy of trust. She thinks about giving up. She thinks about how simple it would be to stop fighting, to accept what this system has decided she is: nobody. Just another disposable woman in a disposable life, easily replaced, easily forgotten. But then she hears Oliver's voice in her head. Mama. That one word, spoken with such trust, such certainty that she would keep him safe. Elena presses her forehead against the wall and tells herself, not while he needs me. Not while there is any fight left in my body. At 6:11 a.m., federal agents arrive at Tyler Brennan's office building. 12 men in black suits move like ghosts through the corridors. They have warrants. They have documents. They have 5 years of evidence that Tyler Brennan has been running an illegal housing scheme that has displaced 47 families, collected false deposits, forged lease agreements, and constructed an empire of theft on the backs of the desperate. Brennan is at his desk when they arrive. He is checking the news coverage on his computer, smiling at the photographs of Elena being led away in handcuffs. His smile disappears when the agents enter. Tyler Brennan, the lead agent, says, "You are under arrest for federal housing fraud, false imprisonment, and conspiracy to commit perjury." Brennan's face drains of color. His hand reaches for the phone, reaches for Sophie, reaches for anyone who might save him, but there is no one. The agents are professional and merciless. They cuff his wrists. They read him his rights. They drag him from the building while cameras, the same cameras Sophie arranged to capture Elena's arrest, now capture his. The charges stack up like dominoes: 40 years federal prison. Asset forfeiture. Restitution payments totaling every penny he has ever stolen. His office sealed. His bank accounts frozen. His name attached to words like predator and criminal for the rest of his life. Meanwhile, in the precinct where Elena sits in her cell, her lawyer, a woman Luca sent the moment Enzo saw her arrested, walks into the interrogation room with a folder thick enough to choke on. All charges dismissed, she announces, dropping the folder on the table. Mr. Brennan's accusations are fraudulent. The forged documents have been identified by federal forensics. The police officers who arrested you have been suspended pending investigation. You are free to go. Elena does not believe her. She cannot believe her. Belief feels too dangerous. But the lawyer is already escorting her back through the precinct, past processing, past the officer who booked her. At 8:15 a.m., Elena walks out of the police station into November rain, and she is free. Oliver is waiting. Luca arranged it so his men would retrieve the boy from Brennan's house before the arrest. Oliver runs toward her the moment she appears, and Elena catches him, holds him, buries her face in his hair and allows herself to break for the first time since this began. "You came back," Oliver whispers. "You said you would not leave, and you came back." "Always," Elena breathes into his hair. "Always, baby. I will always come back for you." She does not yet know what Luca has done. She does not yet understand the full scope of his love, the way he dismantled her enemies with the same precision he would use to dismantle a bomb. But as she holds Oliver in the rain, as she feels the weight of her son in her arms, she understands one thing clearly: she has been saved by a man who asked for nothing in return. And that changes everything. The police station's fluorescent lights hum like a swarm of insects caught in glass, and Elena Voss sits in the interrogation room with her hands folded on a metal table that smells like bleach and desperation. Her wrists are still marked where the handcuffs pressed. The detective across from her slides a folder across the table, and his mouth moves, but the words sound like they are coming from underwater. Fraud. Theft. Conspiracy. Her name attached to crimes she did not commit, evidence forged so carefully that even she almost believes it might be real. Outside the interrogation room window, she can see a clock on the precinct wall. 7:43 a.m. 3 hours since they brought her in. 3 hours since everything collapsed. But in the hallway beyond that door, a woman in a charcoal suit is already walking toward the interrogation room with a folder so thick it could choke on its own weight. This woman's name is Margaret Chen, and Luca Caruso paid her fee, $50,000, non-refundable, the moment Enzo saw Elena's face on the police scanner. Margaret Chen has dismantled corporate fraud cases, she has buried government witnesses, and right now she is moving toward that interrogation room with the kind of certainty that comes from knowing you have already won. The detective inside does not know this yet. He still believes he has a case. He still believes the forged documents will hold. Margaret Chen opens the door without knocking. She is 46 years old, her hair pulled back so tightly it looks like it might split skin, and her voice when she speaks is like a blade wrapped in ice. All charges dismissed, she announces, dropping the folder on the table between Elena and the detective. Federal forensics has identified the forged documents. The signatures are not hers. The handwriting analysis confirms it. The bank transfers were routed through shell accounts registered to a Tyler Brennan and a Sophie Langford, both of whom are currently being arrested on 17 counts each, including wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, and racketeering. The detective's face goes pale. He reaches for the folder, but Margaret is already continuing, her words coming like bullets. The officers who arrested your client have been suspended pending investigation for accepting bribes from Mr. Brennan to conduct an unlawful arrest. The charges against Elena Voss are entirely fabricated. She is free to go. Immediately. Elena does not believe her. She cannot believe her. Belief feels too dangerous, like walking on ice that might crack beneath her weight, and if she falls through, if this is another trap, she will drown. But Margaret Chen is already pulling out a chair, already gesturing for Elena to stand, and the detective is already closing his folder because he understands now that his case has evaporated like rain on hot asphalt. At 8:15 a.m., Elena Voss walks out of the police station into November rain. The cold hits her first, sharp and clean, and then she sees him. Oliver? He is standing beneath an umbrella held by a man in a black suit, and the moment he sees Elena, he runs toward her with such force that she stumbles backward, catching him, holding him, pressing her face into his hair that smells like soap and rain. He is real. He is here. He is alive. You came back, Oliver whispers, his small voice muffled against her shoulder. You said you would not leave, and you came back. Elena cannot speak. Her throat has closed. But she manages to breathe the words, always, baby. Always. I will always come back for you. The man in the suit, one of Luca's men, nods once and withdraws, melting back into the rain, leaving Elena and Oliver alone on the wet sidewalk with the police station looming behind them like a monument to a nightmare that has finally ended. Elena holds her son, because he is her son now, because love is not determined by blood but by the willingness to bleed for another person, and she allows herself to break for the first time since this began. Her shoulders shake. Tears stream down her face and mix with the November rain. Oliver's arms tighten around her neck. Are we going home? He asks. Elena pulls back just enough to see his face, and she realizes she does not know where home is anymore. The apartment is gone. Her life as she knew it has been erased. But then she thinks of the warehouse, of the third floor that Luca never enters, and she understands that home is not a place. Home is this, a small boy holding her like she is the only solid thing in a world that keeps falling apart. Yes, baby, she whispers. We are going home. They move through the rain toward the black SUV waiting at the curb. Enzo is driving. When he sees Elena, his expression shifts, not quite smile, but something close to relief. He has been waiting for this moment since the moment Luca gave the order to bring her in. In all the years Enzo has worked for the Caruso family, he has seen Luca command empires, command armies of men, command silence from enemies who feared him more than they feared death. But he has never seen Luca love something more than he loved vengeance. Until now. The drive across New Orleans takes 40 minutes. Elena sits in the back seat with Oliver's head resting against her shoulder, his small hand wrapped around hers, and she stares out the window at the city passing like a film reel she cannot quite focus on. Her mind is fractured, scattered across too many moments at once. Sophie's face contorted with fury. Brennan's hands on her throat. The cold metal table in the interrogation room. And underneath it all, a single question: what did Luca do? She will find out. The warehouse rises from the industrial district like a tombstone, all broken windows and rusted fire escapes, and Elena has walked through these doors dozens of times, but today they feel different. Heavier. Like they are closing behind her on an old life and opening onto something entirely new. Sergio meets them at the entrance and his eyes find Elena's with an intensity that makes her breath catch. The boss is waiting, he says quietly. Third floor. Elena has never been to the third floor. Luca's men speak of it in whispers, as though it is a place that exists outside the normal rules of the warehouse, outside the empire, a room where even the mafia boss does not belong. She climbs the stairs with Oliver's hand in hers, their footsteps echoing on concrete, and with each step her heart accelerates until she is certain it will break through her ribs. The door to the third floor is open. Inside is a nursery. Blue walls, the shade of a summer sky. A white crib with yellow bumpers. A rocking chair positioned by a window overlooking the street below. Stuffed animals arranged on shelves, a bear, a bunny, a worn elephant that has been loved so much its ears are nearly threadbare. And in the center of the room, in his wheelchair, sits Luca Caruso. He holds Oliver's hand, and his eyes are red. Oliver is asleep, his head resting against Luca's chest, the Caruso pendant catching the lamplight that filters through the window. Luca looks up at Elena, and when their eyes meet, something shatters inside her, not fear, but something more complicated. Recognition, perhaps. The understanding that this man has loved a child he did not raise, has kept this room exactly as it was 5 years ago when his ex-wife took the boy and abandoned him at an altar in front of 300 people. I am sorry, Elena whispers. Her voice breaks like thin ice. I should have told you. I was afraid you would take him, and I could not bear to lose him. Luca's voice comes rough and broken, like gravel crushed beneath a boot. You saved him. For weeks you saved my son, and I suspected you of betrayal. I watched you risk everything, and he cannot finish. His hand moves to Oliver's hair, touching it like it might disappear if he is not careful. Elena kneels beside the wheelchair. The cold floor bites through her jeans, but she does not move. He needed someone, she says. I could not leave him alone. Luca reaches out, and his fingers find the fading bruises on her face, marks left by Brennan that are finally beginning to yellow at the edges. His touch is gentle enough to break her. You gave him what I could not. You made him feel safe. You made him feel wanted. You made him feel like he mattered. Oliver stirs, his eyes fluttering open, and when he sees Elena kneeling beside them, he reaches for her with both arms. Mama, he says, still half asleep, the word tumbling out like he has been saying it forever. Luca does not correct him. He does not flinch. Instead, he simply shifts the boy gently toward Elena, and Oliver moves into her arms as though he was always meant to be there. Stay, Luca says. Not a command. A question. A prayer. Not as an employee. Not as a favor. Stay because he needs you. Because I need you. Elena looks at this man, this powerful man who built an empire from a wheelchair, who has ruled through fear and loyalty codes that are older than the city itself, and she sees him for the first time as he truly is. Broken. Lonely. A father who has been waiting 5 years for his son to come home. She sees the scars on his hands, the lines around his eyes, the way his jaw clenches as though he is holding back words that might destroy him. I am nobody, Elena says. I have nothing to offer you. You offered my son love when the world abandoned him, Luca replies, his voice dropping to barely a whisper. You are everything. The rain outside sounds like 1,000 fingers drumming against the windows, and in the blue-walled nursery that has been a shrine to loss, Oliver holds both their hands and asks a simple question, Are you staying, Mama? Elena looks at this child, this beautiful, damaged child who has already survived abandonment and now has the chance to know something different, and she says the only word that matters, yes, baby. I am staying. 3 months later, the 3rd floor of the warehouse is no longer a frozen memorial. It is a home. Elena sits at a desk with nursing textbooks spread before her like an offering to a god of second chances, and Oliver does his homework beside her, his tongue poking out in concentration as he works through division problems. He is 7 now, or nearly 7, and he calls her Mama without hesitation, without doubt, and every time he says it, Elena feels something inside her heal. Luca works at his desk across the room, the one that was installed so he could oversee the empire from the family space, and the sight of him there, present, invested, choosing to be in the same room as the people he loves rather than hidden away in the darkness below, feels like a miracle that she is not quite brave enough to believe in yet. The warehouse poker room still operates beneath them. The empire has not weakened. But something has shifted. The men who work for Luca have begun to understand that their boss is still ruthless, still capable of destroying anyone who threatens him, but he is also capable of love. They have seen him read bedtime stories, his deep voice making the fairy tales sound like ancient myths. They have seen him teach Oliver chess, have seen him braid the boy's hair with surprising patience and focus. In 15 years of working for Luca, Caruso, Marco, and Enzo have never seen him like this. One evening, Elena puts Oliver to bed, tucking the blankets around him, kissing his forehead, and as she turns to leave the room, she finds Luca waiting in the doorway. His wheelchair is positioned so he can see both of them, and when Elena joins him, he reaches out and takes her hand. His fingers are warm, and his voice comes low and rough. I was broken at my own wedding, he says. Left by a woman who saw only what I could not do. You saw what I could still become. Elena squeezes his hand. You gave me a place to belong. You gave Oliver a father. You gave us both, she cannot finish. Her throat is closing. A family, Luca finishes for her. That is what I gave you. And you gave me back something I thought was gone forever. At the window, November rain falls on the New Orleans streets below, and Elena Voss, who once had $200 and a faded photograph, stands with the man she loves, watching their son sleep in the room that has finally stopped being a shrine to loss and has become, instead, a sanctuary for healing. She whispers the words that have become her truth, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only love can do that. Below them, Tyler Brennan sits in a federal prison cell at Angola, his 40-year sentence a sentence to invisibility, his predatory empire dismantled, his victims compensated from the millions of dollars seized from his accounts. And in a different facility, Sophie Langford watches her wealth evaporate like rain, her name synonymous now with cruelty and manipulation, abandoned by every ally she ever thought she owned. Justice was not death. Death would have been too merciful. Justice was watching them lose everything while their victims rebuilt. If this story moved you, if Elena's journey from invisible to irreplaceable touched something in your heart, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to remember that broken things can be made whole again. Every share is a reminder that love wins, that second chances exist, that the people we meet in our darkest hours can become the light that guides us home. Subscribe to this channel because tomorrow we have another story that will wreck you in the best way. Drop a comment below and tell us what moment hit you hardest. When did you know that Luca and Elena were meant to find each other? Your words matter. Your stories matter. We wish all of you watching this video good health, a joyful life, and days filled with peace and happiness. No matter how hard life gets, remember that after the rain, the sky clears. Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing that love wins. We will see you again in the next video. Goodbye.